Great. All right. Well, just to say thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. It's an absolute pleasure to have been asked to host on this occasion the first meeting of the joint seminars of the European Centre for Living Technology and the International Centre for the Humanities and Social Change. There is a program which you can find kind of on the ECLT website and the Humanities and Social Change website about what's going to be unfolding as this goes along. But this is an initiative that has been spearheaded by the two directors of the centre, Professor Giacometti and Professor Bassi. And so we are very grateful to them for having given the opportunity to try and find the connections between the environmental humanities research that is happening in humanities and social change at the moment and the work that is being done in ECLT. Obviously, with the support of the ECLT Secretariat and the HSC Secretariat. So thank you everybody kind of for helping to organise that. There has been a real opportunity to think about the sorts of advantages and the challenges that are here kind of in this opportunity that for interdisciplinary dialogue. So we have been able to conceive kind of some joint seminars between the fellows, and we're looking forward to those kind of as we go along. And we're hoping kind of that with seminars such as today, kind of where we have a very eminent invited guest, again, that there will be a variety of perspectives that will come kind of into play to enrich the discussions. And in particular, one of the things that has been talked about in the Centre for the Humanities and Social Change in terms of the group of fellows here is about fostering future collaborations. Thinking about new links and possibilities for reaching across disciplinary distinctions. So to everybody who's here today, let's take this as an opportunity to reach across the aisle, as they seem to be saying an awful lot in American politics at the moment, and to think kind of what can be done together. So I'm just going to introduce our speaker. And in terms of the way that the seminar will run, everybody who has participated before will be familiar with the format. We are going to hear from the speaker. Then if you want to put questions in the chat during the session, please feel free to sort of reserve your place, as it were, and we'll keep an eye on the order of who's going to be speaking. And then we will take the questions one by one at the end. Feel free, obviously, during the talk, to keep your camera on if you wish, but please mute yourself. Obviously, if you wish to switch off your camera, by all means, you are welcome to do so. But it is nice for the speaker to have some people to look at and to feel that there is an audience there. And I don't imagine that Dr. Casazza will be any exception to that. He would like to see lovely faces listening to him. So yes, we will be there, and then at the end, just an opportunity to talk about what will be coming next in the series. So as I say, I will now introduce our speaker, and then leave the floor. So Dr. Marco Casazza has his PhD and master's degree in physics from the University of Torino. He also holds a specialization diploma in sanitary physics with an environmental focus from the same institution, as well as an international doctorate in environment, resources and sustainable development from the University of Napoli, Parthenope. He holds the Italian National Scientific Qualification, ASN, as an associate professor in applied physics, and that is in specifically Phys-07. Currently, he's a research scholar in the Department of Sciences and Technologies at the University of Napoli Parthenope. He's also acting secretary and acting coordinator and co-lead for international academic relations of the Sino-Italian academic network Matteo Ricci. His research deals with environmental multi-parametric monitoring, accounting, and management. His interests are human, technological, environmental interactions, environmental impact assessment, and environmental security. Part of his work focuses on the urban environment, developing scenarios of resource consumption based on stock flow modeling and simulations. Lately, he has been adapting and implementing such simulation tools to study the system dynamics of complex diseases such as multiple myeloma. He is also Associate Editor of Frontiers in Environmental Sciences and an editorial board member of Environmental and Sustainability Indicators, published by Elsevier. So as you can hear, he has many strings to his bow, and I'm sure we are going to be getting a very rich presentation today, the title of which is A Desired Future for Urban Metabolism Management, Scenarios, Simulations, Big Data, and AI. The floor is yours, Marco. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the participants. And obviously, thank you for the center. Since you invited me, thank you much for your kind invitation. I'm very honored to be here to share a call for action. I conceived this seminar as an excuse to open a call for action, cooperation, and work together for a sustainable future for our cities. Those who live in Venice are totally aware of the relevance, the problems, and the challenges facing ahead. So that's what we will try to talk about today. So I tried to structure my speech in different points. First, what is a sustainable city? I would give a different subtitle to this point, which resembles the famous title by Dickens' novel, A Tale of a City. Then the problem is under which perspective? I propose a holistic perspective, and not only me, but generally people now and researchers that propose a holistic perspective. And then the point of urban metabolism and its connection with the use of big data, simulations, and artificial intelligence. Next point, what approach should we adopt? Finally, a call to action. First point, which is the idea that we have of the city and which is the evolution of this idea. Thinking that the idea and the physical space that we call city started to evolve mainly from the Euro-Mediterranean area. So, for example, we have the polis in Greece, and we have the urban areas in the Roman Empire, but this is not the only vision in the world. If we think about Asian visions, they are totally different. The urbanization in Asia, in China, and in other countries in Asia are totally different. So we have to think that when we are talking about the idea of city, the past, present, and future of cities, we usually have a Eurocentric, Euro-Mediterranean-centric vision. Once upon a time, a leader of a community decided that he should protect his community, creating a safe space, and often putting at the center of the safe space something that was sacred, mainly a temple. So the city started mainly as a safe and sacred space. But then the second idea was that it was a place of relation to participate, to help support people, to foster them, to participate in the good. The common good, which is different, obviously, from the common good that we are using now as a vision, a general, superior, higher vision of something that is good. So we have the two ideas a physical and symbolic space in the same area where people could connect and try to exploit their desire, sharing new ideas, sharing knowledge, sharing products. Going out in this way, often cities were seen as parasites. So the parasite city was one of the causes of the disgregation of the Roman Empire, because the central government required taxations also in form of materials, food, from all the empire, and these didn't support the survival of the communities. Then obviously the causes are multiple, so I'm not going through this point. The vision of a safe and sacred space, so the vision of symbolic space, continues in the medieval city. Looking to the Latin word, let us think about the Christian influence. So the idea of microcosmos, and that reflected the larger structure and order of the divine macrocosmos. So we had what we can call the cosmopolis. That is a symbolic space where the physical urban structure was constructed by a center where usually the cathedral was placed, the main roads connecting the divine center with the lower peripheries. In other center of the cities, many of them which were walled and protected, like in the picture we have the case of Carcassonne in France, we have also the market that was a relevant center, particularly from the 11th century in the development of European cities, as Jacques Le Goff and other historical study of historical science are pointing out, and also people who study economy from an historical perspective. But then we move on with the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution. The ability to generate.
Sorry, Marco, sorry.
Yes.
We are still seeing the slide number 1. Is that, I think you are not scrolling the slides, or at least something is wrong.
So sorry, I don't know what's happening. That's it. You should, I'm trying to pray. Do you see it?
No, you're stuck in slide.
Well, thank you for signaling me. Sorry. Well, I'll just stop these and back to where I am. Let us see if.
Yeah, just use this
can
mode.
see
Yes.
it.
Okay. Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
No, that's it. So I have to use this mode because it doesn't work.
Yes.
Do you see it now? Great. Thank you. Sorry for that. So we have the industrial city, and the industrial city, thanks also to the development of calculus science, was seen as a reflection of a rational, calculable, and manageable structure. But then the industry arrived, and also people could see big areas of poverty in the peripheries of city when people moved from countryside to the city. So Romantic criticism in the 19th century viewed cities as the bad and the ugly. The city turned from the place to achieve the good into the place of decline, both physical, economical, and moral decline. And nature, that was previously seen in the first Romantic period as wild, untamed, and uncivilized, also in the Enlightenment period, turned into something innocent and pure for relief of the urban stresses. So in the same circumstances, we started to have this idea of the garden city that was proposed by Ebenezer Howard in England, who was pioneer of the garden city movement. Then going to the last century, we arrived to the theory of the Frankfurter Schule. We think about Habermas, Marcuse, and all the other relevant people who belong to the Frankfurter Schule. And they started to deconstruct the original idea of how to view city and the institution within cities with respect to the population. So there was a criticism to the institutional arrangements that weren't enough effective, that were used to manipulate and dominate the social and physical world, and that wasn't well as good. So there was the vision of the established regime that had a top-down vision. Instead, there was the individual right to the city with a bottom-up vision. So they started to develop a sociological vision that we could call a rather systemic vision. We have the urban critical theory stemming from the Frankfurter Schule, and we have the Chicago schools. So they criticized in different ways the life in the city and the way of managing the urban environment. So we come to the present time and what we wish. We wish to live in a sustainable city. Okay. This can be a blueprint of a dystopia that can turn into dystopia when we use just one perspective and not a systemic one, combining multiple dimensions and vision that can be used to describe the city and to envision its future. So a sustainable city, which should be a place beyond any nature culture dichotomy, is a place of relation, considering a multi-actor network of association, as Bruno Latour says. We have three perspectives, as I said, that we could use, and they're all valid. The planner's perspective, that is hierarchies, top-down action, that is a search for order, structure, organization. There is egalitarianism that is reflecting bottom-up vision, and laissez-faire perspective, that is individualism, reflecting the entrepreneurial spirit of people. All these perspectives are reflected into the evolution of urban life and should be reflected to achieve a sustainable city. That is the 11th sustainable goal, to achieve sustainable cities and communities. With all the sub-goals that you can see, including the physical space, the cultural space, and also the social and economical life, because we don't only have the environmental dimension, but we have the environmental, the economic, the social, and the cultural dimension that are parts of the identity of a community. But then we have now different technologies, and we come the possibility to have a data-driven, smart, and sustainable city for the future, where computation and the computation infrastructure can become enablers for a smart and sustainable future for cities. And here, this paper that was published this year highlights some points, targets for ecological and technological future urbanism. So increased compactness of urban space. So this more human dimension city, not spread it over all over space. High density and diversity of buildings for their use. The multidimensional mixed use of buildings. Then we have the problem of transportation, the green infrastructure, because we don't only have the human side, but we have also the nature side and natural infrastructures in cities. Then we have buildings, the problem of energy and buildings and services, the smart and sustainable energy and waste systems. And then we come to the point of technologies. From one side, we have the collection and storage of data and their elaboration. On the other side, we have competencies. So we need people that are ready to integrate these dimensions with a new vision. But the point is a sustainable city a real goal? Well, for policies, yes, but the real desire is urban well-being. The point is that the word well-being is declined in many ways from the physical perspective to the psychological one. And so we don't have really a clear idea of what well-being is, having a shared definition that we can use to fix a real goal. And this is a very problem because we know that differently from common speech, technical speech should fix the definitions and the methods to have common targets. And that's obviously necessary also for policies. So the point is that we try to propose our perspective, but we know that our perspective is not universal. It represents the perspective of a community that should support planning. So it should support decision-making, and it should support the well-being of communities, supporting them with evidence that starts from experimental evidence measure, qualitative evidence also, because there's also the qualitative dimension of investigation, and then a systemic perspective. This is absolutely crucial. And system perspective can be applied to integrate the physical dimension, I mean the flow of resources, material, energy, and economic flows. This is the case of a paper that was published last year by Silvio Cristiano and Francesco Bonella, that is Kill Venice, that tries to integrate and represent with a diagram language the dynamic of resources within a tourist city, and in this case, within Venice. And then we have the idea of the material side, the flow of resources. Why is it so relevant? Well, because the flow of resources and the flow of physical impacts we generate on the environment is relevant for our biological survival, for the survival of the biosphere, for supporting the persistence of a safe space for the biosphere that often is divided with the words of planetary vision of urban metabolism that doesn't stop, however, on the physical dimension. So all the materials and commodities needed to sustain the city inhabitants, that was the old definition of urban metabolism, but is the sum now is considered as the sum of the technical and socioeconomic processes occurring within cities. If you are interested more about this topic of urban metabolism, I co-authored with Professor Gongye Liu, Professor Jifeng Yang, and Professor Sergio Unjati a book that was published last year by EDP Science and Beijing Science Press. So you will find all these definitions and many points about environmental accounting to study urban metabolism in the book. The idea of metabolism derives from biology, obviously. So we started to talk about metabolism in the biological sense in 1614. But then we turned to the economical dimension with Karl Marx and the Capital, and so gradually the idea grew within the study of the use of resources and the flow of resources within systems, and in this case, within cities. We have to know that we are talking about multiple scales, multiple methods, and multiple disciplines that should be integrated, as at the beginning in the presentation of the seminar, that should be integrated to describe the metabolism at its different scales, from individual metabolism, how many resources do I use, how many impacts do I generate, then the household metabolism, HM, then there is the natural metabolism, so what, for example, generates the ecosystem services. We have the urban, regional, national, and global metabolism. We have different disciplines: ecology, urban ecology, industrial ecology, social ecology. We have geography, we have economy, and we have all the methods like input-output tables, input-output analysis, material flow analysis, that is written as MFA, energy analysis, different techniques and instruments to integrate that, to elaborate this data. With this respect, obviously, urban computing is an emerging and extremely important area of intersection, where computer science meets traditional city planning. And what do we know about the use of computer science to be applied to the study of urban metabolism? Well, I just went to Scopus and tried to make an analysis looking to some keywords. When we stopped to look to big data and urban metabolism, simulation and urban metabolism, artificial intelligence and urban metabolism, we discovered that the output products in terms of journal articles and reviews is really poor. Conversely, if we go and search not for urban metabolism, so a more focused topic, but we go to urban planning, the numbers change of 1 or 2 orders of magnitude, as you can see from the table. And as example of what we did together, also with Professor Gongyu Liu and Professor Francesco Gonella, who are present at the seminar, we tried to study the flows connected to food, water, and energy within the urban environment, developing different simulators to simulate on one side the impact of different policies, traditional, business as usual, or related to circular economy at the scale of the city. And that was the case of the paper published in Energy that was focused on Beijing city. The second study focused on Napoli metropolitan area in Italy, instead reflected the relation between household consumption patterns and policy, urban policy and planning approaches to support the transition to a reduced waste of resources and the reduction of impacts, so more higher energy efficiency, less consumption of resources, circular economy patterns, lower impacts, lower production of waste, which we didn't analyze so much in reality and should be investigated more in the future. The problem is supporting the resilience of the community, developing a perspective in which resilience thinking approach is relevant. So we need, as we said, a system perspective. Urban computing can support it, but we need also a mental approach that is resilience thinking. So to study the interaction about the social and the ecological dimensions that are integrating within city, so the interaction between people and the systems. To think about how this dynamic can become stable also in the face of disturbances, surprises, and uncertainty. So the social, economic, ecological dimension, so the integration of social and economical dimension with the ecological dimension is highly relevant. And here we become to the perspective that we should apply to study urban metabolism, that is social ecology. We try to represent, together with Professor Dongin Liu, between the social economical dimension and the ecological dimension. At the core of this hierarchy that is multidimensional, we have environment and resources with flows of resources taken from the surrounding environment. When we have it, we have the management of resources, the economy, in the original meaning of the word economy. So it's oikonomia. So is the management, is the nomos, is the use of norms to applied to our house, that is the environment, or narrowing down the city. Then we have the regulations, and then we have culture. Together with this evolving complexification of the social ecological system, we have a complexification of information hierarchy, materials and immaterials structures that we use to share information. That is both that we can quantify from one side, and on the other side that has meanings. So we cannot forget also the dimension of semantic information. We have individual learning, shared learning, so shared behaviors. We have abstract learning that depends also on the language and the evolution of languages. And then we have abstract thinking, we have codes, and so on. So we have a pyramid of information hierarchy. And we have obviously a process that we should follow to guarantee and to support the community resilience within the built environment. But what McAllister focused on was basically focused on infrastructures and not so much on people. So from one side, we have the infrastructure, but that was thought for the built infrastructure, so we cannot forget the natural dimension. So you see, however, how high is the risk of a limited vision in studying the urban metabolism, and how many can be the data that we need to integrate. And so we have many challenges to identify the products, to apply computation systems, and so to rely on big data. But the point is that we have to collect, we need to storage this data, and we have to check their quality. On the other side, we should connect better the dimension of environmental monitoring and the dimension of accounting and computing. Often these disciplines travel as parallel lanes without strong links and communication. And this is a very big challenge for present time and for the future. Last point, we need a new approach. We often think about problems after they occur. We need a preventive intelligence approach. Intelligence in the sense of use that is based on technologies, what we have as available as capacities and technologies, but is also preventive and based on intelligence in the traditional sense of the word intelligence. So looking forward, vision based on strong informations. Why is it relevant? International community recognized that it is relevant for the security because resource scarcities and ecological threats constitute a real and imminent threat to the future well-being of all people and nations. One case study, very simple one and recent, the Syrian War. First, obviously they had a political background that triggered the conflict, but we have also the environmental side, low agricultural production. People started to migrate from rural areas to urban areas. They didn't find any work to support their survival, and this was another trigger from the environmental side that triggered the Syrian conflict. And then we have the point from conflict to peace building. The effective governance of natural resources and environment should be viewed as an investment in conflict prevention. So we need a future planning for security, but this planning for security, for a stable well-being, both for human community, biosphere, and we should apply a strategic thinking and an intelligence thinking, which means looking to the definition of intelligence, looking at the ability to learn or understand or to deal with new or trying situations. How to do that? We take this point applying the ISTR approach that used in the military field in strategy. We have a comment, an address. So with basic questions, we gather basic information and we formulate a research question. So formulate hypothesis. Then we define a target to which apply this hypothesis and search for information, collecting data. Then we come to the data analysis, the generation of products, their verification and dissemination. So we see that within the left part of the diagram, we have a circular flow between moving around target and evaluation. As soon as we have a strong product and we have enough knowledge, anticipatory knowledge, we can define what are the things, the capacities we need to operate in a certain direction that is defined through the target. And the command line takes a decision, makes a planning, operates, and then evaluates the results of operations. This military approach can be perfectly turned into a process for environmental planning. If we have policymakers and urban planners that are, let us say, the comment from a top-down perspective, gather the information from city, which means data, also allowing a bottom-up approach that we, and the entrepreneurial approaches, because they must be integrated to have a sustainable city. They define a target, they define hypotheses, then there is data collection, the analysis, so there's the dimension of use of computation. Well, computation can be used in data collection and products apply, obviously, and should rely on the use of the technology and the capabilities that we have and you have in your center. They are really precious competences. Some examples, practical from the literature and from my experience, we must consider a multidisciplinary, multi-level, multi-parametric monitoring. We collect data from many aspects, from multiple platforms. We integrate multiple parameters and we monitor. So we have a continuous observation of the parameters we want to observe. The point is that what we get out is not information. They are raw data. This is the reality, with different quality parameters, and they should be integrated and transformed into augmented information. This way of collecting data from MAM3 framework that I co-defined was applied in two cases. One was the case of defining an approach to the monitoring, the three-dimensional monitoring and modeling, the air quality for a sustainable urban port planning. How could we do it? And I'm talking about the seaport. The other approach that was used to detect cyanobacterial blooms in coastal area of Campania region. Applying this approach, monthly framework, we managed to reveal the occurrence of Limbia toxin A, that was a toxin that was almost never revealed in the Mediterranean Sea. There were just 3 other studies in the past in the French area that reported the presence of Limbia toxin A. So this approach is effective. We already tested it. The experimental site, the data collection site for the environmental dimension. Obviously, we have the social, cultural, and economic dimensions that should be integrated. Then we have the analysis, that your competence, use of big data, integration and guaranteeing the quality of big data, their integration. Obviously, there is the new dimension of Internet of Things and the use of new sensors, the use of simulations, as I did together with my colleagues, and the application of artificial intelligence techniques to understand and to detect patterns and to try to take out, to convert raw data into real augmented information that can be used, and this is the last passage, that can be used is crucial. We need to build up some capacities, competencies for reaching all sustainable development goals. That was remarked by UNESCO in this document that was published in 2017. And so UNESCO identified different competencies that will be relevant in the near future for sustainable development. So it's the system thinking competency, the anticipatory competency, the normative competency, that is not just saying I write a norm, but is reflect on existing norms and values to improve the quality of life and to have movable targets, adaptable targets, that's for the purpose of resilience. Then we have strategic competencies, the ability to cooperate, so the multidisciplinarity, the interdisciplinarity that are highly relevant, and critical thinking, so question norms, practices, and opinions to improve them, and self-awareness competency. reflect the role of each individual within the local community to contribute to the good of the community. So all these competencies are highly relevant and should be considered by each one of us to support the realization of a real sustainable city, not to turn from an idea to a dystopia. And so I come to the last point. What can we do together? A call to action. And I have a practical proposal. As we saw, the literature is not absent on the topic of user simulation, big data, and artificial intelligence for urban metabolism and urban planning. There are several studies, but they are fragmented and not always detected. So, first of all, to contribute together for the sustainable future of cities, and especially thinking about Venice, thinking about its vulnerability, this can be highly relevant, not all, for all cities and specifically for Venice. And so the first point is having an arena, as they say today, to share ideas, new visions, present knowledge, and research. So, as an associate editor of Frontiers in Environmental Science, I'm preparing a future call for article collection. I'm also looking for another guest editor, together with Professor Gongyan Liu, that is here, with expertise in artificial intelligence, to come in the board for the article collection. Well, Frontiers in Environmental Science is an interdisciplinary journal with different areas of interest. I'm an associate editor in the area of environmental informatics and remote sensing, for example. But there are different sections. There are 12 sections within the journal. So soon I'm preparing a background document, and soon the call will be published. So if you're interested about it, at the end of this presentation, you will see my email, and so just give me a feedback so I can have your address. And so you will receive the invitation. The second point, we need to cooperate, to create the capacity and to generate knowledge and to generate what supports planning. So within that scheme, ISTR, we need to cooperate. That might be highly relevant. And this is, considering your expertise, it is highly relevant. It will be even more relevant for the future. Your multidisciplinary, multicentric perspective is highly relevant and it's timely. So the second point is an invitation to cooperate, to discuss, and to integrate different knowledges that are too often seen as separate, disaggregated, and not integrated. General common goal or multiple common goals. And finally, the final goal, that is human and nature well-being as a more general goal. So thank you very much for your attention. And now, well, it's time for questions. So back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Marco. Very rich, taking in an awful lot of different directions. I'm sure kind of that we have questions in the room. There were various aspects that would appeal to the different kinds of expertise on the call, I'm sure. There were some theoretical elements, because you mentioned Latour, you mentioned Marx. I mean, some nice 19th century references that I enjoyed as well. Always nice to hear, Charles Dickens being paraphrased. And yes, and particularly, thank you for really setting a tone for the seminar series. If you're talking to us about UNESCO and the collaboration competency, kind of drawing on different bodies of knowledge and getting people to work together for a more sustainable, a more constructive, a more resilient future. So yes, so that really is good for taking us forward. Much appreciated. So open to the floor for questions. I can see kind of in the chat that we already have one from Ivor. So I would ask him to unmute himself and by all means go ahead.
Hi, Marco. Thank you so much for the incredible presentation. It was really interesting to hear about this relationship of AI systems and the urban space, and it reminded me of some work that I've done in my own research. So I'm one of the fellows in environmental humanities here at Ca' Foscari, and in some of my work I've looked at urban studies, and particularly in political geography. And there was a particular debate around metabolism that I remember through a lot of Marxist political geographers, including David Harvey, who you cited, also Eric Svingadau, and how we have the metabolic systems within cities, but then also the relationship of metabolism from the city to the rural and vice versa. And I remember this debate being very strongly about environmentalists really romanticizing quote unquote nature or the rural over the urban, and you kind of pointed to that at the beginning. But I was wondering in your work about how you might see AI and computer sciences not only being operative within the kind of urban metabolic realm, but whether this is in your work you've come across it, or within your own writing there is a relationship between the kind of blurred boundaries between the urban and rural, and not only through resource extraction and farming, but also and supply chains, but also through waste, etc. So yeah, that was kind of my main point. But yeah, thank you again.
Yes, thank you for your question, and thank you for your reflection, your ideas you shared with us. Yeah, that's the point. We are talking about open systems. That's the crucial point. First key point, cities are currently often seen as parasites, a place for consumption, more than places for production. And however, production doesn't come from nowhere, because you need materials and you need resources that flow, and flows are interconnected. Then consumers often don't care. Think about waste management. The point of motivations. We often look to as motivations. This is not true. Motivation is something that is individual or community, but is something that is related also to feelings. It's not only normative. We tend to use a normative and quantitative side into consideration, but we have qualitative and feeling side that is side, but we have also feelings. So there is a big problem of motivations. How to integrate the of computation with the first technological problem. Now we have something new. We have low-cost sensors. We have the ability to produce low-cost sensors also from recycled materials. That's this option. So that's good. But then often we put the data, we store them. We don't consider all the data. If we look to the environmental statistics, often they are incomplete. The type of data that are stored and made available to the scientific community are often insufficient. Second point, the quality of data. If I don't have any information about the quality of data, and if I am not aware that the quality of data is highly variable, depending on the type of data that I use, well, I can give numbers, I mean, to people who do accounting and who do computation. But if I am not aware of about the quality of data, I give some material that is rubbish to be used. And the information that you get out from data collected from the field is just something that doesn't reflect the reality. Often then there is the point of simplification. You cannot oversimplify systems, complex systems. If not, your models are not coincident with reality. You are not anymore able to include, obviously, anything that you could measure, quantify, fixing the quality. Then there are the techniques in which you are expert. I am not. I'm more expert in traditional environmental accounting and simulation monitoring. There should be a dialogue that in the literature doesn't appear to be present. So people collecting data and people analyzing data should discuss together. This is not done enough. Considering all the dimensions, so urban, rural, local, global, regional, national, global, so at different scales, and that's absolutely correct. It's just a little provocation, want to be a little provocative. As I just said before, the quantitative dimension that is what we are dealing with is not enough. If we don't support bottom-up actions, people motivations, we don't understand them, their values, norms, and feelings, we will not move toward cities. I know it for myself. So I appreciate very much people dealing with environmental humanities too. I sometimes deal with environmental humanities since I'm also a violin player, and I deal sometimes with art-based research applied to sustainability. So the relation between creativity and sustainability, which wasn't the topic of this seminar, so obviously I'm not going to talk about it, but environmental humanities and humanities are as much as relevant as hard science, to develop sustainable systems. They cannot be separate. We must dialogue.
So we have appreciation in the chat. Donald, thank you for showing appreciation to Marco. The question that you've just typed, is that something you'd like to talk about now? Would you like to kind of discuss it and come forward? By all means, if you wish.
I would welcome that, yes.
Then by all means, go ahead.
First of all, Marco, thank you so much. I very much enjoyed your presentation. I missed the first few minutes, but I caught much of it, and I'm glad it's recorded, so I'll be able to catch what I missed due to an emergency. What I wanted to underscore for us to wrestle with is that there is an incredible urgency that we work collectively and integratively, like you're talking about, more holistically, especially in the context of the climate changes that are happening with increasing rapidity and increasing impacts. We have the Paris agreements to try to stay below 1.2, something like that, below the average of the pre-industrial revolution, but we're already exceeding that. And no way in heaven's name, at the current pathway, are we going to be below 2 or 3 degrees above the pre-industrial era. And with all of the impacts of that, trillions and trillions and trillions of cubic meters of ice from the Antarctic and from Greenland and so on are coming off every year. And that's just one aspect. The methane is coming away from the permafrost, and it's going to come off with increasing rapidity. Those kinds of parameters need somehow to be on front and center in this aspect of urban metabolism, rural metabolism, global metabolism. Add to that 83 million net increase in Homo sapiens on the planet per year. We've got lots of urgent issues. COVID has killed a couple million. Air pollution kills 8 to 9 million per year. But in that context of where we're going, we've got to make some fundamental and rapid changes.
Thank you, Donald. And you pointed out a relevant, key question that I showed when I showed the ISTR diagrams. The point is that when you define the hypothesis and the target, you must consider some key questions, and you pointed out some relevant global key questions that become the part and the basis to define the goals, the targets. So thank you very much. So the point is exactly one. Data and evidence-based decision-making based on data collection, on prior knowledge, data collection, the analysis, guaranteeing the quality and a continuous circular flow from data to information, verification, that improves, that becomes an adaptive mechanism and evolutive mechanism toward the sustainability of cities, but not only of cities, toward the supporting and the generation of a space, say, a safe space for humanity. That was the purpose of defining the planetary boundaries.
Okay, but nonetheless, I don't get any sense of urgency.
That's the point. Yeah, that you are right. The point is motivation, urgency, and positive motivation. Think about the pandemics. We have negative motivations. We are fed up with negative motivations. We are confined in our home for our survival, obviously, that's good. But we are fed up with information, news, newspapers, internet, social networks, fed up by pessimism, negative information, not urgency. We should adopt something that is also positive in case of something that we are living that is negative, and we should drastically change and transform. So that is another point. How do we communicate what we know? Not through numbers, but giving a sense, a proactive and positive sense of future.
Thank you, Marco. More questions from the floor? If anybody who would just like to come forward, anything that you have in mind that you would like to ask? We probably have about another 15, 20 minutes, if that's okay with you, Marco, just to take some more time for that. So if anybody kind of would
No
like
problem at all. It's okay.
Okay, great. So yes, kind of anybody got anything in mind? Any burning questions? If not, sorry, Donald, yes, you've got your hand up, by all means, go ahead.
Well, Marco, I'd like to get back to your special collection of articles. Give us a broad vision of what you hope will be achieved by that collection of articles. And especially in the context of the Paris Accord and rapidly changing climates and the likelihood that COVID-19 isn't the last of these types of pandemics that we're going to be receiving. What do you hope will be accomplished by that collection? What will be dug into in depth, not in big, broad lines where we never get anywhere, but where we get beyond the blah, 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 and get something done?
The point, as I remarked in the last part of the seminar, was capacity building. We need to build capacities and to create dialogue, multidisciplinary dialogue. So the best space is obviously a journal that acts as an arena. The dialogue that is necessary, as we wrote together in a paper some years ago, is the dialogue between the dimension of data collection, the experimental activity in the field, and how to elaborate the data. So what we call often environmental accounting, and also the dimension of scenarios development, so through computation and all the abilities that the center in Foscari has. The point is that if we don't create an arena for dialogue, saying, okay, I have this data, you have these techniques, how can we integrate them, methods, how we assess and guarantee the data, the way to get out patterns, the validity of models and their limitations, all these points should be to open a dialogue that is absent from such a long time in many scientific disciplines. Physics is one of them, but not only. I mean, there have been beautiful studies, researches that are incredible. They required a lot of effort. They still require a lot of effort. There have been beautiful results. Now we can integrate these different dimensions. The dimensions of technologies and measurement, dimensions, all the different aspects of computation, and see how can we do it practically and in different contexts. How can we do, and what are the aware that we should investigate more and that we will have more challenges. If we don't open such a dialogue and we have the benefit of an interdisciplinary journal, we will not move a step ahead to support the goals that we wish to reach, the targets we wish to reach. So that's the point. Obviously, we are refining the contents and we are also open to suggestion. So back again, if you have ideas to share, please write me back and give me feedbacks. They are really precious now.
Dan, listen, thank you so much. Yes, I agree. All of that kind of sets of specialists need to be communicating with each other. Absolutely. That's been my life's work on interdisciplinary, multidisciplinarity,
Heather, if they just keep talking to each other, I'm just going to bring you in anyway, okay?
I'm sorry, what?
So yeah, so I just want you to come in kind of and say, sorry, I need to talk to you for a second because I feel that I don't want to kind of take you away too much, Donald, but yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that what is communicated in that special issue is also some of it couched for policymakers at the local level and at the national level and at corporations and others within the broader integration of circular economy. We'll talk further later, Marco.
Yes, sorry, Don, I don't kind of want to cut you off, but it's just, you know, if that's okay. Heather had a question in the chat a little while ago, so thank you. Heather, by all means, go ahead.
I was wondering what you think about the role of citizen science and citizen networks for collecting data, sharing techniques, analyzing data, stuff like that, because that often takes place outside of a journal.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. And that's another relevant point. We had a few calls in the last calls for Horizon 2020, dealing with citizen science, by the way. So your topic comes apropos, and it's the question that is highly discussed. Well, I managed to review several papers about citizen science, becoming acquainted about it. I mean, it's not a question of trusting or distrusting, but knowing the potentialities and knowing the potential difficulties. In terms of difficulties and challenges, often people are involved just because they live in one place, but not as communities. Generate totally different results, for example. Place-based approach, so you live in a place, and I call you to use some simple instruments to collect data. Well, that doesn't work too much. The sense of belonging and community is more relevant. Second point, and general mistakes that can be improved, and as some example of positive feedback. One direction, you are the citizen, you send me the data, you work for me. So the monodirectional flow and involvement of citizens just as data gatherers, that doesn't work. People should see the benefit of what they do. Meaning, if you collect this data and we manage to understand how to better use the resources, you might get back some savings, you might see your area that is a degraded urban area with some initiatives, and you might start to live in a more livable area, because I use the data, I decide with you what is meaningful for you, you tell me what is meaningful for you, I tell you what is meaningful for me, and then we go to planners. So we need to engage with all stakeholders to generate a positive feedback for citizens involved. Unless we do that, The point is that we risk to have a high level, well, participation at the beginning, then people just leave because they don't have a real motivation. So this is the point. The technological side, that's the last point, the technology side. I give you an instrument, I give you a smartphone tool, I give you something to get the measure. You do need to train you to get acquainted about what you collect, how you should know, how you can get the data, how you can assess the basic quality of the data, and how can you do, and how you can do the basic maintenance if I give you a low-cost sensor. So I should train you, not only motivate citizens, I should train citizens. That last point, the relevance of training that is relevant to guarantee a sufficient level of data quality. Then there is the dimension of data collection, cloud, the differentiated level of access to data depending on the understanding of data and needs, and which doesn't mean, however, to exclude people from the benefits and from the discussion of wished benefits. So within this dimension, again, computing is crucial. Data quality assurance, data interchange, and everything is highly relevant. So your expertise, again, can be highly precious.
Thank you, Marco. Heather, I don't know if you wanted to follow up with anything. No. Okay. So I can see in the chat, and I can imagine this would be an ongoing conversation. Donald, Marco, you can read the chat, I imagine, and to see what Donald has written about.
Yes, I read it.
It's in science. So yes, so I will leave the two of you to continue that discussion. The opportunity now for anyone else, kind of who would like to come in, kind of who hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Kind of anybody, if anybody's listening, kind of, and would like to turn on their camera, kind of, and come and ask a question, by all means. If anybody wants to put anything in the chat, kind of that can be asked. If that's all right, maybe a last question or a last couple of questions for Marco. I feel he's given us a good sense kind of not only kind of the work kind of that has gone into the presentation, but also about ideas of where this is heading, and indeed thinking about what sort of special issue might be in the offing here. So that's already good. But anybody who would like to come in? I think that's everybody's very contented with what they've heard. Unless anybody is writing something in the chat as we speak, I think we can probably draw it to a close. I mean, there are some questions that we could definitely take forward here, and some things that I imagine people in the Centre for the Humanities and Social Change will certainly be reflecting on. Marco, you raised some points thinking about the parasites, cities as parasites, there's certainly something there, given especially that you mentioned Bruno Latour and actor network theory, the relationship between Serre and Latour, thinking about the evolution from work that was done in the late 70s up to the early 2000s. I mean, the actor network book with Oxford University Press came out in 2005, right? So so thinking about that in relation to where we are with those theoretical points, as opposed to looking back at that. So there's an interesting historical coincidence that that you've also outlined in your paper, which is about Marx's use of urban metabolism in 1859 is the same year as A Tale of Two Cities, right? So when you're talking about best of times, worst of times, and I suppose this intersects a little bit with Donald, what you were saying about it, you know, like action and urgency, kind of, and what's at stake, kind of, with taking things forward. You know, because of course, you know, part of that, you know, it's about being an age of wisdom, but also an age of incredulity, right? And, you know, kind of how far have we come from that kind of text and from that time, kind of, in which they were writing. So yes, kind of, so plenty to think about. So very grateful to you for that. Thank you, kind of, for kind of setting us on a road to closer collaboration between kind of the two sides of Cabotagin and indeed beyond. And just to say, kind of, to everybody who's here, there is going to be kind of another event, kind of, which is at the intersection, kind of ECLT and the humanities and social change on the 4th of June at 3 p.m. And that session is going to be entitled "Contemplating Borders from Machine Learning to the Environment," and that's going to involve Iva and Emiliano from the Centre for the Humanities and Social Change, and Francesca and Teresa from the European Centre for Living Technology. So feel free to mark your calendars now, kind of, and we shall see you, kind of, for that occasion. And obviously, again, just a very big thank you to you, Marco, kind of, for sharing, kind of, your knowledge with us, and to everybody who's come along and contributed and indeed made part of the audience today. Thank you.
Thank you.